Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Mystic Monday with Josh and Kim.
Welcome.
Oh, man. We're going to kind of continue on with where we left off on last episode. Just talking, we sort of barely touched on the differences in slave and sonship mindsets and how that applies to your finances and the way you see the economy and the world and your place in it. So we're going to kind of just touch a little bit more on that, dive a little bit deeper into that. But first, we, like always, want to go over just a little bit of what's going on in the market. So, Kim, you got any updates for us?
Sure thing. So Bitcoin is up 1.5% in the last 24 hours, still down 3.7% over the last 7 days. Ethereum is down on both, so down less than 1% in 24 hours and down about 6.5%. So percent over 7 days. Luna, you know what? I just decided we'll start giving updates on Luna because we talk about it so much. So Luna's up 7.9% in 24 hours, but still down 6.1% in 7 days. Now, the one that we like to do, we always like to point out one that is a big mover in the top 100. And we keep talking about this one. So though this is not financial advice, it is maybe something to keep an eye on. GMT, which is STEPN, the number 69 coin, is up 13.4% in 24 hours. It's up 28% in 7 days. And even more remarkable, it's up 314.5% in 30 days. So we've talked about it a little bit before, but here's a real quick synopsis of what this GMT coin is. STEPN is a Web3 lifestyle app with social-fi and game-fi elements. Users equipped with NFT sneakers walk, jog, or run outdoors in real life to earn tokens and NFTs. STEPN has a dual token system, and users earn the GST. I think it's supposed to be GMT, the GMT token. So that's kind of what that's about. Again, this is an interesting crossover coin because it takes kind of cryptosphere, metaverse kind of stuff, all of the NFT stuff, and crosses it over with the activity you're actually doing in real life, outside, or maybe on a treadmill.
True. That is true. And you earn crypto by doing it. So
exactly.
If you're into those things, it's a great option for you.
Absolutely.
So when we ended last time, you had a really interesting statement that I want to start off with, where we were talking about the Israelites stepping out of Egypt and into the wilderness, and sort of why they had to shed that knowledge that they brought with them from Egypt before stepping into the promised land. So would you like to just kind of recap that, and then we'll just jump off from there?
Sure. I was talking a little bit about some experiences I'd had with the Lord where I saw some like world systems and structures starting to crumble and be destroyed, and started talking about the necessity and why it might be necessary that some of the systems that are already in place, like let's say the financial system, may need to crumble and go away in order for something new to come in. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. It's just, this is a concept, okay? But what I had said that day was, even if Father himself gave you something new to step into, would you actually step wholly into it? Or would you wind up going back to what you know? And so I do think sometimes the Father will take away the other option if he really has to have something ushered in.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit I really like this example of talking about the Israelites in Egypt and their transition from Egypt to the wilderness to the promised land. But it's a kind of what you're saying is if they had stepped out of Egypt and the next day stepped into the promised land, they would have made the promised land look like Egypt.
Mm,
They would have gone back to what was familiar. They would have rebuilt the systems that were familiar to them. Mm.
absolutely. And we're talking about this, and I don't know how much we've shared on the podcast, but about a year ago, Josh and I went through this process of we talked about the Great Recession and how we both left our normal corporate jobs. But then the Lord took us into this place where essentially we were halfway across the world with limited access to some of our normal technologies. And what he did was he led us into this time of rest that we weren't getting in our normal jobs that we had just left. And that might have been more difficult to step into had we been in our normal situations.
Yeah.
And when he did that, it was honestly in hindsight, I look at it and I see that it was this time of serious reprogramming for us. All I knew was to function from a calendar, full calendar, rush from here to there, um, get up, work, come home, work, go to church, work. Like it was work, and there was very little rest. But what he did is he took this time away, like completely took us out of our element, and he taught us how to source from a place of rest. But it was so necessary for the process of reprogramming, which I have to say, I recognize in the whole situation with the Israelites too.
Mm.
After their exodus, I mean, they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. But just like you said, had they gone quickly um, from Egypt to the promised land, would they have just recreated Egypt?
Right. Yeah, it's such a it's such a thought-provoking thing. Like, we've certainly there's been many sermons taught on why they were in the wilderness for so long, and I'm not saying this is the only reason, but I do think that their belief system was core to them not being able to step into what had been promised to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if that and here's just a good example of that. When they do send the spies into the promised land to look at it, most of them come back and say there are obstacles in the way.
Mm-hmm.
There are reasons that this is never going to work. And two of them come back and say, "Oh, we didn't even notice the obstacles because we saw all the opportunity." And that is that's just so telling in how important your belief system is, how important your mindset is when you are stepping into something new that God has for you. We like to think that the promised land was totally open and available and there was nothing in the way, but they had like work to do.
Mm-hmm.
They cleaned out giants, they cleaned out enemies. It was a process of them occupying and transforming the promised land. It wasn't just this vacant land that no one had ever been in before. And
Right.
that's sort of, obviously we are fans of crypto, and that's sort of what we see. We see the financial system and the shape that it's in, and we see crypto, and there's all these people saying, it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible. Look at all these obstacles, look at all these obstacles. But are you willing to step up to a higher way of thinking and say, oh, maybe there are some obstacles, but look at all these opportunities, and which one is going to outweigh more for you? Like, if you really see the opportunity, you're not going to worry about the obstacle. I mean, if I told you that you had to crawl through a pit of sewage and on the other side of it was $1 billion, you would be willing to do it because you see what is on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're all called to do, especially as mystics, like step up to a higher spot where we are seeing things from Father's vantage point and then make our decisions from there.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the mind shift from a slave mentality to a son mentality really happens. It is very difficult to get that change of mentality if you're only focused in the earth
Yeah.
and not focused on kingdom, if you're not focused on the Father, if you're not looking from kind of a higher vantage point. And I mean, you were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, Josh, about what slavery looked like for the Israelites before they left Egypt. Do you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this topic all week just because that's sort of where we ended things. And what came to mind was, what was life really like as an Israelite in Egypt? Yes, we say they were under slavery, and that's certainly not a fun thing. However, we know that they had homes, we know that they had fields, that they had cattle, that they had families, that they had some freedom to worship, um, at least in some regard, the way they wanted to. And it just made me think, like, man, that sounds a lot like America, or just like the modernized employment world in
Mm-hmm,
general.
mm-hmm,
Like, you are owned by somebody else, but you have freedoms. You can, I own a house. I can travel. I can have a family. I can have things, but am I really free? And this is what I have to wonder about them as well, is, they were in Egypt for like 400 years. So there was nobody in Egypt that remembered life before Egypt. That was the only thing they knew, was slavery.
sure.
And all the people that I know currently, the only thing they know is the current employment system. They've never had an opportunity to live outside of that. And it just makes me wonder, like, do we even realize if we are in slavery or not? And I'm not saying that every job you have is slavery and you should go quit. I'm just proposing that there may be similarities and things we can draw comparisons to between these things. Because I think part of the reason that the Israelites struggled so much in the desert or in the wilderness is because that was what they knew. That's what they were familiar with. They didn't even know something else could exist. They were born into that system. They were under that system. That was what was normal to them. So they were promised something better, but they had never seen it. They didn't know anyone who was from there, who walked that way. And
Mm-hmm.
it just made me think so much about my life. Like, I know I've been promised better things, but I don't know anyone that's really functioning from that land, from that promised land. Like, this is what I know.
Absolutely. I think this is so important. And I love that this is the direction this is going. Um, because I have to think about, if we look at our culture and just the state of employment, kind of how you were talking, we've been told that we have this opportunity um, to get a job, make money, be independent, be financially free, be able to afford the things that you want, be able to travel, all the things. Except what happens is, once you get a job, then you get more things, and then you have to keep having the job to afford the things or to keep up the things. And what happens is, and I've been through conversations with the Lord with this, and I'll just be honest, it was jarring when he was talking to me about it. And so, just my apologies if it's jarring to you. I would recommend taking this to him as well. But he showed me how much I have been a slave, in that I have submitted my life to working for money and for working for things and working for status. And what that essentially does is it takes him out of the picture and it is building my own kingdom, right? I want money for the things that I want. I want money to level up in life and to have a certain status. Maybe I have a certain size of house in a certain neighborhood, or maybe I have a title, right? But that's really building my own kingdom. That's trying to build myself up by working for these things. And what he showed me is that was very much a slave mentality, because I'm working for these things that aren't even, they're not kingdom, right?
Yeah.
If he flips the narrative and I start working as a son, then my money starts working for me. And the things that are in my possession start working for me. And whatever status I may have in the kingdom starts working for me. And when I say me, I don't mean the self that is Kim, that is her own kingdom. I mean Kim, who is a son who operates in the kingdom, in the capital K kingdom, the kingdom of God, right? And so it's just this switching of this paradigm. And though it may wind up even looking the same, you may still go to a job. But once your money starts working for you, this is when you really start seeing kingdom being built. And you start seeing the wealth transfer that has been on the tip of everyone's tongues for the last decade. You know what I mean? Like this great wealth transfer that's supposed to be happening. And I believe we're in this real sweet spot with the Lord in this age, in this time, however you want to say it, where he really is kind of shifting things. And we have this opportunity to step into partnership with him and operate as sons. So he is the father and we are the sons. And yes, I'm a woman and I'm still a son, just like Josh, you're a man and you're still a bride. Just language, but we have this opportunity to act as a son. And when you act on behalf of the father as a son, you step into the authority that he has. And you start being able to move things and make things happen in his name. And you start being able to know and discern what he would want to have happen with things and step into partnering with that. And that's what I'm talking about with some of the sonship. And as a son of Yahweh, the Most High, God, Father, Abba, Adonai, whatever you want, whatever name you want to put on him at this very moment, he's the one who has the power and authority over everything. And so you start not operating from a place of lack or having to rely on money to make things happen. You rely on him who has everything, is everything, has created everything. And then the wealth or the money starts working for you. Right. And it's so interesting if you can start taking this perspective and start operating from that, how you can really see things start to shift. And this is why we're so passionate about crypto, is because he's shown us this is part of his will. This is something that he's behind. And it has a lot to do with some of the wealth transfer. And so when we talk about trading, we're trading as sons. So we are going to the Father, seeing what he wants and partnering with that. And I believe that's when you start seeing things shift and really big movements start happening.
Yeah. So you said something that I think is really thought-provoking about money working for us instead of us working for money. And what's interesting is most financial courses or things you would do would tell you that money is a tool. That's how they would describe it. It's like they have the language of the free, they're using some of the language of the free, but are you actually stepping out of the ownership of money owning you? We call it a tool. We say money is a tool that I use to buy things and to support my family and to travel or do, whatever things. But is it just a tool by name, or is it a tool by spirit, in that how we're functioning in our relationship with it? And I think that's what's really important. We kind of touched on this a little bit before we started recording as well, but there is a difference between having the correct language. There's a difference between having sonship language
Mm.
and actually functioning as a son. There's a difference between having the appropriate language with money versus actually having the proper relationship with money. And there's a there is a big there's a big difference between those two, because I can sit here and tell you all day long that money is a tool that I use and that I function under the kingdom's financial system. But in my life, does it actually look like that? That's, I think, what everyone has to ask the question, like, are the fruits of the spirit evident in my financial life? Are the fruits of the spirit evident in my relationships with other people? I mean, that truthfully is what's going to show you, are you functioning in the spirit in that area of life?
Mm. That's really good. That's really good. I mean, if we look at that concept of finances and the fruits of the spirit being reflected through that, like, you can go through the list: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Are those things that you can recognize in your relationship with finances in this earth? And if not, this is probably something you need to take back to the Lord and see what's happening. I'll tell you one little snippet of something I've learned through dealing with a lot of junk regarding finances. Go figure, right? I have learned that the spirit of lack and the spirit of greed are very closely related, and they kind of manifest exactly the same way. So whether you have a lot and you have to hold on to it because it's mine, 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 or whether you don't have anything and you have to hold on to whatever you do because it's mine, 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 I may not make it. It's interesting if you look at it from this perspective that they're closely related, and they put the same kind of clogs on like the flow of finances through someone. And I don't know why I decided I need to say that, but maybe somebody needs to go address that with the Lord and see if there's something that's clogging those pipes, that's making money not want to come in and making money not want to go out. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. It's so interesting. Money has been something that I've heard taught forever from worldly people, from church people, and money management and how to do this and how to do that. But what's interesting is every time that I've had conversations with money with the Father, he's always shown me as money being like water. And when water sits still and doesn't move, it becomes stagnant. But when water is flowing, it stays fresh. And so it's like, okay, well, if I'm truly connected to the source, Father, and I believe, not just think, but I actually believe in my heart that he is the source of everything I have, then I will never operate with a lacked mindset or a greed mindset, because I will always know that there is abundance that is feeding into my life. And so I will never be tempted to store up water. If water comes into my life, I will always push it out somewhere else. If money comes into my life, I will always give. I will always sow into people. I will always build the kingdom. And it's just such an interesting connection that he's given me for years. And I don't always remember it and I don't always function that way. But there's like really good examples. Like there was one time, it was right after I purchased my home, like 2 weeks after I bought a new home, an appliance broke and it was like $700 to fix or something like that. And I had just, spent money on furniture and moving and all the expenses associated with buying a new home. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And I think I had like $800 in my bank or something like that. Like I had just enough to cover it, but I was like, won't have any money left over. And so I was praying about it and I felt like God told me to give the money I had away. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I did. This was one of the times I was actually obedient. And I gave away all the money that I had in my bank account. And I don't remember exactly where I gave it, but I gave it away. And like a day or two after I gave it away, the job that I worked at gave me a $1,500 bonus. And it was like literally, I mean, double what I needed, almost double what I had. And it was totally unexpected. There wasn't a reason for it. I didn't know it was coming. It just showed up. And it was just that, okay, do you trust me to provide even when you don't see what's on the other side?
Absolutely. I think that's so good. And I had this thought about, okay, I'm not the best at quoting scripture, so forgive me in advance. But when one of the disciples needed money to pay taxes and Jesus went and got the money out of the mouth of a fish, like, do you know this is such a good example of not being concerned about where finances come from? Like, it is there and available. You just need to go get it, right? And it wasn't stealing from someone else. It is one of those supernatural things that if you are truly partnered with the Father, and he's the one who was always only doing what he saw the Father doing, right? If you're doing this, finances can come from places that you would never, ever think of or expect. But he provides. And it's always remarkable. It's always miraculous, but I'm looking forward to the day where it's no longer a miracle, where it is just how we function. Do you know what I mean? And I have to think about, I love the analogy with the water, because I was thinking earlier about us being sons and operating in finances on behalf of the Father, on behalf of the kingdom, and really kind of being a conduit and someone whom finances can flow freely through, whether in or out, but it just flows freely, as opposed to being a place where you get the clog, right? I don't know why I was thinking about this, but I was thinking about it even in reference to like a shower head. Have you ever had like calcium or whatever it is that clogs up the shower head, and then only a few little places are open to let water come through, and it just doesn't function how it's supposed to when there are clogs, like the flow just isn't right. But when the clogs get moved out of the way or never developed in the first place, which would be ideal, all of the water is allowed to flow freely, and it comes out evenly, and it comes out how it needs to, and everything functions how it's supposed to function.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. It's really just about operating from that place of relationship. I mean, Yeshua operated by doing what he saw the Father do, which meant he was flexible in every situation to that, and he was flexible and he was sensitive to that voice of the Father who said, do this now, this time do this, now this time do this.
Mm.
And he wasn't relying on his own knowledge to guide him through that situation. And that's where we get stuck a lot of times is, okay, I've been through this, I know what to do, but maybe this time it's a different answer. And if you're not in a relationship, then you don't see that, and you miss the opportunity of stepping into what's truly yours. So if I could encourage you to do anything, just like we always say, take it to the Father. Look for the evidence of the Spirit in your life, in your finances, in your trades, in your relationships. And if you don't see them, then go to the Father and work on getting some of that build up, some of those clogs cleaned out.
Heck yes. It's a good word. Okay. I think that's good for today.
Yeah, sounds good.
Josh, thanks for your input. You're awesome.
Same. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time.
All right, bye. Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.